What's going on, guys? It's the Draft Nerd, and today we're going to be looking at the Draft Network's 2025 NFL Mock Draft, and it's written by Jamie Eisner. I believe that's how you pronounce it. But without further ado, let's get into it. Alright, coming in at number 1, we got the Jacksonville Jaguars going Travis Hunter, and I agree with it. The Jaguars need both weapons on the offense and secondary help on the defense. And it doesn't really matter which position Travis Hunter ultimately chooses because the Jaguars kind of need both. I'm more of a guy who wants Travis Hunter to, primarily play cornerback and then have a few, sets on the offense where he can, come in and try to make an impact. I don't think he's going to be able to play both sides full time. And, I just think if you want to use him to his fullest potential, play him at cornerback and then have a few packages where he can run him on offense. But if I was a betting man, I would bet that Travis Hunter would just want to play receiver just because receivers make the money in the NFL. They make so much more than cornerbacks. So if I had to pick, I would want to play both cornerback and a little bit of receiver, but ultimately I think he's going to want to play receiver in the NFL, and the Jaguars need it. Pairing him up with Brian Thomas, that's a really good receiving core. Moving on to number 2, we got the Las Vegas Raiders, and yeah, everyone and their mom's picking Shedeur Sanders to go to the Raiders. I mean, it seems like Shedeur wants to go to the Raiders want Shedeur to come to them, and really the Raiders just need a quarterback. They can't keep, rolling out Aiden O'Connell. And so they need a quarterback. Shedeur Sanders seems like the perfect fit. I'm not mad at it. As a Giants fan, I kind of want Shedeur Sanders, but I also kind of don't. This quarterback class isn't great at all. But if I had to choose right now, I think Shedeur Sanders is the best quarterback in the draft, so the Raiders get their quarterback of the future. Moving on to number 3, we got my favorite team, the New York Giants, and they do go Cam Ward, the quarterback out of Miami, and if Brian Daboll does end up sticking around for another year, I think Cam Ward will be his guy. We all know he was one of the main catalysts for, Josh Allen succeeding in Buffalo, as Brian Daboll was the offensive coordinator back then. Cam Ward is similar to Josh Allen as to, he's an athletic quarterback with a big arm, but is widely known as a raw prospect. Brian Daboll might be able to, turn Cam Ward into a Josh Allen. Is it a bit of a long shot? Yes. But is Cam Ward probably the second best quarterback in this class, in my opinion? Yes, and the Giants need a quarterback desperately. I don't think the Giants should, try to sign a bridge quarterback like a Justin Fields or anything like that. Just get your quarterback. I know this is a weak quarterback class, but, I think Cam Ward's worth a top 3 pick, in my opinion. Moving on to number 4, we got the New England Patriots going Will Campbell, and they just need to go offensive line. What they've rolled out for Drake May to play behind is atrocious. Even, their best offensive lineman, Michael Wanu, hasn't been playing great this year. Will Campbell, they got him listed as offensive tackle. Some people think he's going to be a guard. Some people think he's going to be a tackle. I want to see what his arm length is going to be. I think he could stick at, left tackle. But if anything, I think he would be an all-pro guard in the NFL. So the Patriots need offensive line help, whether it's tackle or guard. So I'm not mad at that pick at all. Moving on to 5, we've got the Carolina Panthers going Abdul Carter. And my opinion on Abdul Carter has really turned around. To start the season, I didn't quite see what other people were seeing in him. He played mainly off-ball linebacker last year. And, from the few pass rush sets I've seen him play last year, I wasn't the hugest fan. But, man, I really love Abdul Carter now. I think he is a top 5, caliber player. And the Panthers need pass rush help desperately. Getting rid of Brian Burns, trading him to New York. Derek Brown's been injured most of the season, although he is more of a run stuffer. He's not a pass rushing defensive tackle per se. They really don't have much at all. They're probably one of the worst pass rushing groups in the NFL. Getting a guy like Abdul Carter would probably really, really help that defense that is desperate for talent. Moving on to 6, we got the New York Jets going Mason Graham, and it's tough to mock a player to the Jets right now. If Aaron Rodgers is done in New York, whether he retires or just moves on to another team, they could go quarterback here. Jalen Milroe's still on the board. I know he hasn't had the best, string of games here recently, but, primarily that Oklahoma game. But I still do think he's a first-round talent. Do I think he's a top 10 talent? Not really. They could also go with maybe a receiver here, a Tetairoa McMillan. Tight end. I don't think there's a tight end worth taking here at 6. I like Mason Graham a lot. That defensive line is already stacked. but they could use a defensive tackle like a Mason Graham. But I'm probably a bigger fan of the Jets taking Will Johnson. Pairing him up with Sauce Gardner would, oh god, that would be just must-watch TV. But I'm not mad at Mason Graham. I think Mason Graham's a top 3 player in this draft, so getting him at 6, you can't complain about that. Moving on to 7 here, we got the Tennessee Titans going Tetairoa McMillan, the receiver out of Arizona. And, the Titans are another team that maybe goes quarterback, depending on if they like a Jalen Milroe, maybe a Quinn Ewers. I've seen him kind of coming out of the woodworks as a first-round talent. I'm not necessarily on board with that, but, the Titans could use a quarterback. Will Levis has been playing pretty well the past few weeks, but is that enough to keep him around for another year? I think so. Some people don't. We'll have to see. I don't think there's a quarterback worth taking here. Why not get a, receiving option to help Will Levis out and a Tetairoa McMillan being that big-bodied receiver, pairing him up with Calvin Ridley, who's more of that speedy separator. I like that pick a lot. Treylon Burks is obviously not the talent they thought they were getting when they picked him in the first round a few years ago. They traded away D-Hop, so they could use a young receiver, and I think Tetairoa McMillan is the best in the class, depending on what you see Travis Hunter as. Moving on to number 8, we got the Cleveland Browns going Kelvin Banks Jr. And yeah, I like the Browns going offensive line here. Again, another quarterback needy team, depending on what you want to do with Deshaun Watson. I mean, you can't cut him, but you can bench his ass. That's for damn sure. But again, Jalen Milroe, is he worth a top 10 pick? I don't think a lot of teams are going to think that. And, looking at that Cleveland Browns offensive line, it was one of the best units in the league a few years ago, but it's gotten old pretty quickly. Kelvin Banks, again, a lot of these top offensive tackles can be viewed as guards as well. I think Kelvin Banks is going to stick at offensive tackle. I think he has a better chance at sticking at offensive tackle than a guy like Will Campbell. And the Browns need offensive line help, so I'm not mad at that at all. I assume, Jedrick Wills would probably be the replacement for him. I'm not mad at that at all. Moving on to number 9, we got the New Orleans Saints taking Will Johnson, presumably being that Marshawn Lattimore replacement. And, I know Will Johnson hasn't had the best season, but when you watch the tape, he's still an elite cornerback and, in my opinion, a top 3 player in this class. I absolutely adore Will Johnson. So getting arguably a top, 1, 2, 3 player in the class at number 9, I love that a lot. And, pairing him up with Paulson Adebo, I assume, I can't remember if he's got an expiring contract or not. I don't think he does. So Will Johnson, Paulson Adebo, I like that pairing a lot. Really, I just like Will Johnson on any team. I'm just a big fan of Will Johnson. Moving on to number 10, we got the Cincinnati Bengals going Shamar Stewart, the edge rusher, more of a tweener out of Texas A&M. He could play 3 tech, he could play out on the edge. He's kind of a versatile piece. And, for the Bengals, I usually always go defensive line here. I think that's their most pressing need. And when you got a guy like Mason Graham off the board already, and Abdul Carter off the board, I think Shamar Stewart is kind of that next guy up, that next tier with a guy like maybe a James Pierce, someone like that, and Nick Scoreton. But I'm a big fan of Shamar Stewart. I think he's worth a top 10 selection here. Moving on to number 11, we got the Chicago Bears going Ariante Urzuri, the offensive tackle out of Minnesota. And I don't care who the offensive lineman is, the Bears need to take an offensive lineman in the first round. You got your prized possession in Caleb Williams, and you need to protect him. You just need to. Ariante Urzuri is a good start. Presumably playing him at left tackle, maybe right tackle. I'm not too sure. They need just offensive line help in general. Really, I think everyone on that offensive line is replaceable at this point. So getting BPA on the offensive line is what the Chicago Bears should do. And off the top of my head, I think Ariante Urzuri is, maybe that guy. You could go with that Josh Simmons, depending on what you think about his injury and things like that. But, I'm a big fan of Ariante Urzuri. I'm not mad at that pick at all. Moving on to number 12, we got the Miami Dolphins going Jalen Walker, the linebacker edge out of Georgia. He's kind of a Swiss Army knife for Georgia, but I do think he's going to play edge in the NFL. I think that's his best spot. The only problem is the Miami Dolphins, they took 2 edge rushers in last year's draft, and a Chop Robinson and a edge rusher out of Colorado State. What's his name? Mo Kamara. So, do they need another one? They still got Bradley Chubb as well. I mean, I think there's more pressing needs. The Dolphins seem to never want to go offensive line in the first round, but I think they could here. They could go with a guy like Cameron Williams, more of a raw prospect, similar to a guy like Amarius Mims out of last year's class. I think that would be a good pick here to maybe be the potential replacement to Teron Armstead, who's mostly injured nowadays. So I would go offensive line here, but I'm not mad at the Jalen Walker pick. I like him a lot, just maybe not necessarily to the Dolphins. Number 13, we got the Dallas Cowboys going Luther Burden, the receiver out of Missouri. And I always say Cowboys should go either Ashton Jeanty, which is the most popular pick, or go receiver, whether that's a Tetairoa McMillan or a Luther Burden. I just think they need to get weapons on that offense. I'm a big fan of them going Ashton Jeanty. Now that he's, slipped past number 13 to the Cowboys, I don't know where he might land. He could, end up late first round, or it could be the next pick. I'm not even too sure. But, Luther Burden, I like that a lot, pairing him up with CeeDee Lamb. They really don't have a receiver 2 now. I mean, Brandon Cooks has been injured, and even when he's been on the field, he's not been very productive. So they do need a receiver 2, but they also need a running back desperately. This is a stacked running back class, though, so maybe they could find one in the second or third round. Luther Burden, I think, could be a really good number 2 receiver for him. Moving on to number 14, we have the 49ers going Cameron Williams. I don't necessarily know if they would stick him right at left tackle, but eventually you're going to need a Trent Williams replacement. And maybe a guy like Cameron Williams, who's more of a developmental guy at tackle, could eventually be that replacement. I like that pick a lot. You could also look to go maybe secondary, but I think Cameron Williams is a pretty good selection here for the 49ers. Moving on to 15, we got the Indianapolis Colts going Malik Starks, the safety out of Georgia, and I'm starting to like this pick here to the Colts. Malachi Starks is a very, very good prospect, but since he does play a position like safety, which isn't necessarily valued too much in the NFL, he's going to end up falling to mid to late first round, even though I think he's a top 10 talent undoubtedly. But Malik Starks, the Colts love their, athletic freaks in the secondary. They took a Juju Brents, who was a, height, weight, speed freak a couple years ago in that draft. I think Malik Starks is that type of player, but at safety. I think he's borderline a blue chip prospect, and anytime you can get a blue chip prospect at 15, you can't complain about it. Moving on to 16, we got the Tampa Bay Buccaneers going Benjamin Morrison, the cornerback out of Notre Dame. And the thing about Benjamin Morrison is he had a late season injury, like they see right here. We don't necessarily know, or at least I don't know if anyone else does, how severe it is. I've been hearing that it's a little bit more severe than initially thought, but injuries aside, Benjamin Morrison is definitely a first round talent, and I think the Buccaneers could use that talent. Moving on to 17 here, we got the Rams going Colston Loveland, the tight end out of Michigan. I mean, they need a tight end. They don't have that premier tight end. Are there bigger needs? Maybe. I'm actually somewhat of a fan of them going quarterback here, like a Jalen Milroe. I mean, Matthew Stafford's not going to be, elite for much longer, or even serviceable for much longer. So getting a, maybe a bit of a project at quarterback like a Jalen Milroe, who can learn behind one of the greats at quarterback in Matthew Stafford. Also having a great mind ahead coach. I mean, that doesn't hurt either. So I think the Rams are one of the best landing spots for a Jalen Milroe. But Colston Loveland's a good tight end. He's probably 1A to 1B with Tyler Warren, the tight end out of Penn State. But I'm not mad at it. They could use a tight end. I just really like Jalen Milroe. As a destination for the Rams. Moving on to 18, we got the Cardinals going Walter Nolan, the defensive tackle out of Ole Miss, and I've been a big fan of Walter Nolan since I first laid eyes on him this summer. And we haven't quite been able to see Darius Robinson, but pairing Walter Nolan with Darius Robinson on the inside of that defensive line, I'm not going to be mad at it. I think Walter Nolan could be a potential top 5 defensive tackle in the league one day. So I'm a big fan of Walter Nolan, and I'm not mad at the fit here with the Cardinals either. Moving on to 19, we got the Falcons going Mykel Williams, the edge rusher out of Georgia, and the Falcons just need pass rush help. They really have nobody, to rush the passer, really. So I kind of like going James Pierce here to the Falcons. Mykel Williams is also a solid player as well. Hopefully they'll get Braylon Trice back from, I believe, was a torn ACL. I believe that was their second or third round pick at last year's draft. Hasn't gone to play for the Falcons yet, so a combination of getting Braylon Trice back and drafting a guy like Michael Williams, I think that could turn the Falcons pass rushing defense around very quickly. Moving on to 20, this is where we get Ashton Jeanty going to the Broncos. Yeah, I mean, that Broncos offense is looking better and better each week. They could use a running back. Javonte Williams doesn't look like the same player he was early on in his career. Getting a guy like Ashton Jeanty who could immediately be a top 5 running back in the NFL to pair along with Bo Nix in his sophomore season and, Courtland Sutton. I'm not mad at this pick at all. I just really like him to the Cowboys. But if he doesn't go to the Cowboys, I think this is a very interesting landing spot for Jeanty. Moving on to 21, we got the Seattle Seahawks going Wyatt Milum, or Milum, however you pronounce it, the offensive lineman out of West Virginia. And again, another top offensive tackle who could end up moving into guard. If he sticks at tackle, I think he could be an Abraham Lucas replacement. If he slides into guard, I think that's, okay as well. Let's see if they, specifically say what they want him to play here. The offensive line seems like a yearly concern for the Seahawks. And this draft cycle is no different. Wyatt Milum plays tackle at West Virginia, but likely projects to guard in the NFL level. Yeah, I see him as an immediate upgrade over Laken Tomlinson. Okay. I think he could be an upgrade over Abraham Lucas as well. He just never seems to be able to stay healthy, but also moving him into guard and being that Laken Tomlinson replacement, I'm not mad at that either. Moving on to 22, we got the Commanders going at Emeka Egbuka, the receiver out of Ohio State. So that would pair him up alongside Terry McLaurin. Emeka Egbuka, I like him in the slot, but I think he could also play on the outside as well. I like that pairing. I mean, they would need a bit of a bigger alpha receiver because, Emeka Egbuka and Terry McLaurin are kind of smaller-ish, shifty receivers, but I like that pairing a lot. Emeka Egbuka is just a smart receiver. I think he's similar to a Puka Nacua-esque player who can play on the inside, outside. Is just a smart, well-rounded receiver, in my opinion. Didn't have the best season a year ago, but has had a bounce-back season this year. I think he's solidified himself as a round 1 receiver, and I like that fit here with, him and Jaden Daniels. Moving on to 23, we got the Houston Texans going Tyler Booker, the offensive guard out of Alabama. And the Texans need, guard help, really badly. That's what I typically go for him. Tyler Booker, I really liked him in the beginning of this process. I've kind of tapered off on him a bit. I think he could sneak into the first round, so I'm not mad at that pick. The Texans need guard help, and that's what Tyler Booker will provide. Moving on to 24, we got the Baltimore Ravens going Josh Simmons, the offensive tackle at Ohio State, and they need help on that right side. Even left side with Ronnie Stanley, he's injured a good amount of the time, and I believe he is also a free agent, so he could play left tackle, or you can move him into right tackle. The Baltimore Ravens just really need pass protection, and I think Josh Simmons could come back from injury and provide that for the Ravens. I like that pick a lot. Moving on to 25, we got the Chargers going Omarion Hampton, the running back out of North Carolina. This is the most Jim Harbaugh pick I've ever seen. The Chargers want to be that hard-nosed offense that's going to run the ball right down your throat, and that's exactly what Omarion Hampton will provide. He's a north and south runner who's got the athleticism to bounce stuff to the outside, but he is not afraid to lower his shoulder, and he almost never goes down on first contact, so that's the most Chargers pick I've ever seen. I'm a big fan of it. I do think he's borderline my running back too. It's between him and Quinshon Judkins, but I do like Omarion Hampton's fit with the Chargers a lot, so I'd be willing to take him in the first round. I like that pick a lot. Maybe one of my favorite picks of this draft so far. Moving on to 26, we got the Steelers going Isaiah Bond, and I'm a big fan of either taking an Isaiah Bond, or if a guy like Emeka Egbuka falls, I take him to the Steelers as well. The Steelers aren't known for taking first round wide receivers, but I think this is the year they could break that. I mean, besides George Pickens, who do they have? I mean, Van Jefferson's cool, but he's nothing special. I think you need to get this offense some more receiving talent and take some of the pressure off of a George Pickens. And having a guy like Isaiah Bond, who's a quick, shifty receiver, paired up with George Pickens' ability to go up and get contested catches, I think that's a perfect pairing. I'm a big fan of that. I just don't know if the Steelers are gonna be willing to take a receiver in the first round. They're just so good at taking, receivers down the board in rounds 2 and 3. But I do like the pick. Moving on to 27, we got the Packers going Siobhan Revell, the cornerback out of ECU. And the thing with Siobhan Revell, he's similar to a guy like Quinion Mitchell last year, who is coming from a small college, might have to prove himself. The only difference is Quinion Mitchell really did well, during the offseason process with, the Senior Bowl and the draft combine. Siobhan Revell is injured and most likely will not be able to participate in any of that. So our team's going to be able to trust that he's going to hold his own against better talent than what ECU typically goes against. That's the only problem I have. I think he will be able to, but our team's going to want to be able to see that first. I don't necessarily know. So I do think he's a fringe first round talent. He's just a bit of a risky pick in my opinion. Moving on to 28, we got the Minnesota Vikings going Kenneth Grant, the defensive tackle out of Michigan. And the Vikings do need defensive tackle help. Kenneth Grant's an athletic freak at the defensive tackle position. He's got amazing speed. Like, he's able to catch running backs from behind. So I really like that pick a lot. Not much more is needed for that pick. 29, we got the Buffalo Bills going Nick Scourton, the edge rusher out of Texas A&M. Big fan of Nick Scourton. I think he's a top 16 talent. So getting him here at 29 is really good for the Bills, who do need pass rush help. So I would really, really like that pick. Moving on to 30, we got the Philadelphia Eagles going Tyler Warren, the tight end out of Penn State. Yeah, Dallas Goedert's getting up there in age. I'm not sure what his contract situation is looking like. I believe he's got this year and the next year. So getting Tyler Warren to be that backup plan. The Eagles have always had a good tight end, whether it's Dallas Goedert, Zach Ertz, Brent Selleck. They do a really good job at just thinking ahead. The Eagles don't need anything right away, so getting a guy like Tyler Warren to sit behind Dallas Goedert and even a Grant Calcaterra, he's been really, really well. Has been really, really good as well. But Tyler Warren's just a different player. I think he's definitely a first-round talent, and the Eagles just keep getting richer. I could also see them going receiver here. Get a wide receiver 3, just a luxury pick, but I don't know. I like Tyler Warren here too. Moving on to 31, we got the Kansas City Chiefs going Jahdae Barron, the cornerback out of Texas, and yeah, they say right here he's a do-it-all defensive back, and that's what he is. He's played outside corner this year and held his own. He's also a really, really good slot cornerback, which is what he played before this season. I think he can do it all. He could probably even move to safety if the Chiefs need him to. So wherever they need him, I think he could play. So I like that as a kind of a Swiss Army knife type of pick for the Chiefs. Moving on to number 32, the last pick of the draft, we got the Detroit Lions going James Pierce Jr., the edge rusher out of Tennessee, and that's a home run of a pick. Getting James Pierce with the last pick of the first round is amazing. He had a slow start to the season, but he's really picked it up during that SEC play. I think James Pierce, probably shouldn't be on the board here, but since he is, pairing James Pierce up with Aiden Hutchinson, Aiden Hutchinson is more of a powerful, technically sound guy. James Pierce more of that athletic freak. I think that's a bit of a thunder and lightning combo there. Absolutely amazing pick, chef's kiss. I love that pick a lot. And then that's going to do it. Let me know what you think of this draft. I don't think there was any outlandish picks, maybe a few that I disagreed on, but overall I agreed with most of them. So let me know what you guys think of it down in the comments. And with that being said, I'm the Draft Nerd, and thanks for watching.